The great hall of Zentara Prime buzzed with worried voices. 47 different alien species had gathered for an emergency meeting of the Galactic Council. The massive chamber filled with creatures of all shapes and sizes, from the tall, graceful Kalari to the small, furry Trixians. Everyone looked scared. Ambassador Zexhai of the Kalari stood at the center podium. His blue skin had turned pale, and his forearms shook as he held the datapad. The usually calm diplomat could barely speak, without his voice breaking. Honored members of the council, Zexhai began, his words echoing through the silent hall. My people are dying. The Vorthak Empire has destroyed 12 of our colonies in the past month. They burn our cities, take our children, and kill anyone who resists. He activated the holographic display above the podium. Images of burning Kalari. Cities appeared in the air. Massive Vorthak warships rained fire from the sky while ground troops marched through the streets. The council members gasped at the brutal scenes. We have tried to reason with them, Zexhai continued. We offered them tribute, trade agreements, even complete surrender of our outer worlds. But Emperor Vorthak wants total conquest. He wants to make slaves of every Kalari in the galaxy. The Trixian representative, a small creature covered in golden fur, spoke up. The Vorthak have been expanding for 300 years. No one has ever stopped them. What can we do that others could not? Murmurs of agreement filled the hall. The Vorthak Empire was the most feared force in the galaxy. Their ships were massive, their weapons powerful, and their soldiers ruthless. They had conquered dozens of worlds without ever losing a single battle. We could send a diplomatic mission, suggested the Zentaran Prime Minister, a tall being with silver skin. Perhaps we can negotiate some kind of peace treaty. Zexhai's eyes filled with despair. They do not negotiate. They only destroy and conquer. Last week, they captured our diplomatic ship carrying peace offerings. The Vorthak sent back the crew's heads as their answer. The hall fell silent. Everyone knew the reputation of the Vorthak. They were not just conquerors, but monsters who enjoyed causing pain and fear. No civilized species could match their brutality. From the back of the hall, an old Kalari scientist named Dr. Velnash slowly stood up. His ancient voice carried across the chamber. There might be one option we have not considered. All eyes turned to the elderly scientist. Velnash had spent his life studying the galaxy's most dangerous worlds and their inhabitants. He was respected but often thought to be slightly crazy. The humans, he said simply. The hall erupted in shocked gasps and nervous laughter. The Zentaran Prime Minister looked confused. The humans? You mean those primitive creatures from the death world called Earth? Dr. Velnash nodded. They are from what we classify as a Class 12 death world. Their planet has massive storms, deadly radiation, extreme temperatures, and creatures that hunt for sport. Yet somehow, these humans not only survived, but thrived. But they are so primitive, protested the Trixian representative. They only discovered faster than light travel 50 years ago. They still use kinetic weapons instead of proper energy blasters. What could they possibly do against the Vorthak Empire? The old scientist's eyes gleamed. That is exactly why they might succeed where we have failed. We think like civilized beings. We value life, seek peaceful solutions, and fight only when absolutely necessary. The humans think differently. Their entire world tried to kill them for millions of years, so they learned to fight back. You are suggesting we ask barbarians for help? The Zentaran Prime Minister sounded horrified. I am suggesting we ask warriors for help, Dr. Velnash replied firmly. The humans have something we lost long ago, the will to fight without rules, without mercy when protecting the innocent. The debate continued for hours. Most council members thought the idea was insane. How could a species that had barely left their home system challenge the mighty Vorthak Empire? The humans had no experience with galactic warfare, no advanced energy weapons, and no understanding of civilized combat. But as the arguments went on, the truth became clear. No other option existed. The combined fleets of all 47 council species could not defeat the Vorthak. Their military leaders had already run the calculations. Even working together, they would lose. Finally, Zexhai spoke again. My people, Have perhaps 2 months before the Vorthak reach our homeworld. If there is even the smallest chance that these humans might help, we must try. The vote was close, but the Council agreed to send a message to Earth. They crafted a careful diplomatic request, explaining the situation and asking for any assistance the humans might provide. 3 days later, the message reached the edge of human space. Commander Jake Morrison was leading a routine patrol aboard the diplomatic vessel Liberty when the transmission arrived. His communications officer, Lieutenant Amy Chen, looked puzzled as she decoded the alien message. "Sir, we are receiving a priority transmission from something called the Galactic Council. They say it is an emergency request for military assistance." Jake frowned. "Military assistance? We have never even met most of these alien species. What kind of emergency?" The message began playing on the main screen. Ambassador Zexhi's desperate voice filled the bridge as images of destroyed Kalari cities appeared before them. The human crew watched in growing horror as the footage showed. Vorthak soldiers burning homes and dragging screaming families from their houses. "My God," whispered Lieutenant Chen. "They are asking us to help them fight a war." Jake's jaw tightened as he watched the brutal scenes. The Vorthak tactics reminded him of humanity's own dark history. The worst moments when humans had turned on each other with savage cruelty. But this was worse. This was an entire empire built on causing suffering. "Get me a direct line to Earth Command," Jake ordered. "Priority Alpha. Admiral Hayes needs to see this immediately." Within hours, the message reached Earth's military headquarters. Admiral Lisa Hayes, the commanding officer of the Human Defense Force, gathered her senior staff in the Situation Room. The same horrific footage played on their screens, but the reaction was very different from the Galactic Council's helpless despair. Colonel Matt Rodriguez slammed his fist on the table. "This is genocide. These Vorthak monsters are slaughtering innocent civilians." Defense Secretary Patricia Wells looked concerned. "We barely know anything about galactic politics. This could be a trap or some kind of alien civil war. We do not understand." "Does it matter?" Colonel Rodriguez shot back. "Look at those images. Children are being murdered while their parents watch. We cannot just ignore this." Admiral Hayes studied the tactical reports her staff had prepared. The Vorthak Empire controlled hundreds of worlds and commanded thousands of warships. On paper, they seemed unstoppable. But Admiral Hayes had not become the leader of Earth's military by backing down from impossible odds. "How long would it take to reach their space?" she asked. 18 days at maximum speed with our fastest ships," replied her tactical officer. "But Admiral, we would be heavily outnumbered. Intelligence estimates suggest the Vorthak have at least 50 ships in that system alone." Admiral Hayes was quiet for a long moment. Around the table, her officers waited for her decision. They all knew what was at stake. Humanity had never fought a major space battle against alien forces. They had no idea what kind of weapons or tactics the enemy used. But they had seen the footage. They had heard the desperate plea from a dying species. And every person in that room knew what humans did when faced with bullies and monsters. "Prep the fleet," Admiral Hayes said quietly. "Full battle readiness. We leave for Kalari space in 12 hours. The decision was made. For the first time in galactic history, someone was going to answer the Vorthak Empire's brutality with something they had never faced before: the fury of the Deathworlders. Admiral Lisa Hayes stood on the bridge of the dreadnought Vengeance as it led a fleet of 20 human warships through the dark void of space. The massive ship hummed with power, its thick armor plating designed to survive the worst that space could throw at it. Around her, the crew worked with quiet efficiency, checking weapons systems and preparing for a battle unlike any in human history. The human fleet looked strange compared to the elegant ships of other galactic species. Where alien vessels were smooth and graceful, human ships were angular and brutal. They looked like what they were: machines built to fight and survive in the harshest conditions imaginable. Every surface bristled with kinetic weapons, missile tubes, and defensive systems that had been tested in the radiation storms of Jupiter and the asteroid fields of the outer system. Captain Ryan Cooper commanded the destroyer Retribution, a sleek but deadly ship designed for fast strikes and hit-and-run tactics. His crew had trained for years in the combat simulators, but they all knew that real battle would be different. Still, Cooper felt confident. Human ships were built tough, and human crews were tougher. "Admiral, we are receiving updated intelligence from our scouts," reported Lieutenant Commander Amy Parker from the stealth frigate Ghost. Her ship had been modified with experimental cloaking technology based on old submarine designs. In space, stealth was about hiding heat signatures and electromagnetic emissions rather than staying underwater, but the principles were the same. On the lower decks of the Vengeance, Marine Colonel Sam Davis checked his equipment one final time. His soldiers wore power armor designed for hostile environments. Thick plates that could stop energy blasts and kinetic rounds while keeping the wearer alive in vacuum or toxic atmospheres. Each Marine carried weapons that fired depleted uranium, rounds at incredible speeds. Other species considered such weapons primitive, but humans had learned that sometimes the old ways worked best. The fleet had been traveling for 16 days, pushing their engines to maximum speed. Every day brought new reports from Kalari space. More colonies were falling to the Vorthak advance. Millions of civilians were dying or being taken as slaves. The peaceful Kalari had no idea how to fight back against such overwhelming brutality. "Jump. Coordinates locked in," announced the navigation officer. "We will arrive at the edge of the Thyros system in 3 hours." Admiral Hayes nodded. Thyros was the last major Kalari colony still holding out against the Vorthak advance. Intelligence reports suggested that at least 30 Vorthak warships were surrounding the planet, preparing for the final assault. The human fleet would be outnumbered, but Hayes had not expected this mission to be easy. "Signal all ships," she ordered. "Battle stations. Load all weapons and charge defensive systems. When we drop out of hyperspace, we go in hot and ready." Throughout the fleet, alarms began sounding as crews rushed to their combat positions. Gun turrets rotated as targeting computers came online. Missile tubes filled with warheads designed to punch through the heaviest armor. Shield generators hummed to life, creating protective barriers around each ship. The human ships were different from anything the galaxy had seen before. Other species built their vessels for exploration, trade, and occasional police actions. Humanity had built theirs for war. Every system was redundant, every weapon was designed for maximum damage, and every piece of armor was meant to keep fighting even when everything else failed. As they approached the Thyros system, the fleet intercepted Vorthak communications. The aliens were celebrating their latest victories, describing in detail how they would torture the remaining Kalari defenders. Some Vorthak commanders were placing bets on how many slaves they would capture when the planet finally fell. Captain Cooper listened to the transmissions with growing anger. The Vorthak talked about sentient beings like they were animals to be hunted. They bragged about the pain they had caused and the fear they had spread. It reminded him of the worst bullies from his childhood, except these bullies had starships and energy weapons. "Disgusting," muttered Lieutenant Parker over the comm channel. "How can any species be so cruel?" Colonel Davis had a simple answer. "Because no one ever made them stop. That changes today." The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Thyros system. Immediately, their sensors picked up the Vorthak fleet arranged around the planet in a standard intimidation formation. The alien ships were massive, each one twice the size of the largest human vessel. Their hulls gleamed with polished metal and energy shields that sparkled like stars. On the surface of Thyros, the remaining Kalari defenders watched in amazement as new ships appeared on their sensors. They had been expecting another Vorthak fleet to arrive and finish them off. Instead, these ships were broadcasting human identification codes. "This is Commander Veltash of the Kalari Defense Force," came a weak transmission from the planet. "Human ships, you should not be here. The Vorthak will destroy you. Save yourselves while you still can." Admiral Hayes opened a channel to respond. "Commander, this is Admiral Lisa Hayes of the Human Defense Force. We received your people's call for help. We are here to drive the Vorthak away from your world." There was a long pause before Veltash replied. "Admiral, there are 30 Vorthak ships surrounding our planet. You have 20. Please, do not sacrifice yourselves for us. We are already lost." "Nobody is lost until we say they are lost," Hayes replied firmly. "Stand by for tactical coordination." The Vorthak had noticed the new arrivals. War Prince Kethvar, commander of the Third Fleet, studied the human ships with amusement. He had heard reports about these so-called Deathworlders, but they looked pathetic compared to his massive battlecruisers. Their ships were small and ugly, covered with primitive weapons that belonged in a museum. "Signal the lead vessel," Kethvar ordered. "Let us see if these primitives can be frightened away like all the others." The transmission came through on all frequencies. Kethvar's voice was deep and threatening, filled with the confidence of someone who had never lost a battle. "Unknown vessels, you have entered Vorthak space without permission. I am War Prince Kethvar, commander of the Third Fleet and servant of Emperor Vorthak. Turn around now and flee, or be destroyed like all who oppose us." Admiral Hayes looked around her bridge. Her officers were calm and focused, running final checks on their weapons systems. These were veterans who had trained for years in Earth's harsh conditions. They had faced solar storms, asteroid fields, and the vacuum of space itself. A bunch of alien bullies did not scare them. "Open a channel to the Vorthak commander," Hayes Dew ordered. When the connection was established, her voice was steady and cold. "This is Admiral Lisa Hayes of the Human Defense Force. You have 30 seconds to withdraw from Kalari space and release all prisoners. This is your only warning." The response was immediate. Kethvar's laughter echoed across the comm system. "You dare threaten me, primitive? I have conquered 17 species and destroyed 1,000 ships. I will add your skulls to my collection and make slaves of your crews. Your pathetic little fleet will burn like all the others." "You will find that humans burn differently than other species," Hayes replied. Then she cut the transmission and turned to her crew. "All ships, advance to attack formation. Target their command vessel first. Show them what Deathworlders can do." The human fleet began moving forward at full speed. Instead of the usual cautious approach that other species used, they charged straight at the enemy formation. Their weapons were already charged and ready to fire. War Prince Kethvar watched in disbelief. "They are attacking? All of them? Do they not understand how outnumbered they are?" His tactical officer looked equally confused. "Sir, no species has ever attacked us directly. Usually they try to negotiate or flee. These humans seem to be excited about fighting us." "Then we will give them the fight they want," Kethvar snarled. "All ships, open fire. Disable their engines and weapons. I want prisoners to question." The Vorthak fleet opened fire with their standard energy weapons, beams designed to disable enemy ships rather than destroy them. They had learned that intact vessels were more valuable than debris, and living slaves were worth more than dead bodies. The energy beam struck the advancing human ships and seemed to have no effect at all. The humans had built their vessels to survive solar radiation and cosmic storms. Vorthak energy weapons, designed to overload the delicate systems of civilized ships, barely registered on human sensors. Captain Cooper smiled as enemy fire washed harmlessly over his shields. "Their energy weapons are useless against our armor. All ships, return fire. Target their engines and weapon systems." The human response was devastating. Instead of energy, beams. They fired solid projectiles at incredible speeds. Depleted uranium rounds punched through Vorthak shields like they were made of paper. Kinetic weapons that could smash asteroids tore into alien hulls, causing massive explosions. The first Vorthak ship to be hit simply disintegrated. Its elegant hull, designed for intimidation rather than real combat, could not handle the brutal impact of human weapons. The crew had barely enough time to scream before their ship became a cloud of expanding debris. War Prince Kethvar stared in shock. "Impossible. Our shields should have stopped those primitive weapons." "Sir," his tactical officer reported with growing panic, "their projectiles are moving at 30% of light speed. Our shields are designed to stop energy weapons, not solid matter moving that fast." The battle had only been going on for 2 minutes, and the Vorthak were already losing. These humans fought like nothing they had ever encountered. Instead of trying to disable enemy ships, they simply destroyed them completely. No mercy, no attempts at capture, just pure, efficient destruction. Admiral Hayes watched the tactical, display as her fleet tore through the enemy formation. Signal the planet. Tell Commander Veltash that help has arrived. Then get me a damage report. No damage to report, Admiral, came the reply. Enemy weapons cannot penetrate our armor. Hayes nodded grimly. The galaxy was about to learn a hard lesson about what happened when someone threatened innocent people in front of humans. The Vorthak Empire had never faced an enemy that fought to win rather than just survive. The real battle was just beginning. War Prince Kethvar watched 3 more of his ships explode in balls of fire and metal. The human fleet was cutting through his formation like a blade through soft flesh. Nothing in his 300 years of conquest had prepared him for this kind of warfare. All ships focus fire on their lead vessel, he commanded desperately. Concentrate everything on that ugly dreadnought. 15 Vorthak battlecruisers turned their weapons toward the Vengeance. Energy beams powerful enough to melt mountains struck the human flagship from all directions. The bridge shook slightly, but Admiral Hayes barely noticed. Her ship had been built to fly through solar storms and asteroid fields. Vorthak energy weapons were like gentle rain compared to what the Vengeance could handle. Damage report, Hayes called out calmly. Minor shield fluctuations, Admiral. Hull integrity at 100%. All weapon systems operational, replied her tactical officer. Hayes smiled coldly. Return fire. Target their command ship. The Vengeance's main guns rotated toward Kethvar's massive flagship. The weapons were kinetic cannons designed to break apart asteroids for mining operations. When they fired, the depleted uranium rounds traveled at 1/3 the speed of light. Kethvar's ship, the Destroyer of Worlds, was 2 kilometers long and covered in thick armor plating. It had survived dozens of battles against other alien species. The ship's shields could stop any energy weapon in the galaxy. But it had never faced weapons like these. The kinetic rounds struck the Vorthak flagship like hammers from the gods. The first shot punched through the shields as if they were not there. The second shot tore a hole clean through the ship's armor. The third shot hit the main reactor. The explosion lit up the entire system. The Destroyer of Worlds, flagship of the Third Fleet and pride of the Vorthak Empire, simply vanished in a ball of nuclear fire. War Prince Kethvar never had time to understand what had killed him. Captain Cooper aboard the Retribution was having his own success. His destroyer was smaller and faster than the big dreadnought, perfect for hit-and-run attacks. He had identified a cluster of Vorthak cruisers trying to flank the human formation. Take us in close, Cooper ordered. Target their engines first. The Retribution dove between 2 enemy ships, firing its weapons at point-blank range. Human tactical doctrine was simple. Get close, hit hard, and keep moving. The Vorthak had never fought anyone crazy enough to fly directly into their formations. Cooper's guns tore through the first cruiser's engine section. The alien ship began spinning out of control, unable to maneuver or retreat. Instead of finishing it off, Cooper moved to the next target. Sir, the first ship is disabled but not destroyed, reported his weapons officer. Should we finish them? Negative, Cooper replied. Broadcast surrender terms. If they refuse, then we destroy them. The crippled Vorthak ship received the human message. Surrender immediately and release all prisoners or be destroyed. No negotiations, no bargaining, just a simple choice between life and death. The Vorthak captain chose death. His species had never surrendered to anyone, and he was not about to start with these primitive humans. He opened fire with his remaining weapons. Cooper shook his head sadly. So be it. Fire all missiles. The Retribution launched a full spread of nuclear-tipped torpedoes. The Vorthak cruiser disappeared in another brilliant explosion. Throughout the battle, the same scene played out again and again. The humans offered surrender terms, the Vorthak refused, and another alien ship died. Lieutenant Commander Parker was conducting her own private war from the stealth frigate Ghost. Her ship used cloaking technology based on old submarine designs, making it nearly invisible to enemy sensors. She would appear behind Vorthak formations, launch torpedoes, then vanish again before they could respond. Target the supply ships, Parker ordered her crew. Cut off their ammunition and fuel. The Ghost materialized behind a group of Vorthak support vessels. These ships carried spare parts, ammunition, and fuel for the main fleet. They were lightly armed and never expected to be attacked directly. Parker's torpedoes struck 3 supply ships in quick succession. Secondary explosions lit up space as stored ammunition cooked off. Without supplies, the remaining Vorthak warships would be forced to retreat or run out of power. "Good shooting," Parker said with satisfaction. "Take us to the next target." The Ghost vanished again, leaving the Vorthak commanders wondering where the attack had come from. They had never faced an enemy that could appear and disappear at will. Their sensors showed empty space, but their ships kept exploding. The most brutal fighting was happening on the ships themselves. Colonel Davis had led Marine boarding parties onto several damaged Vorthak vessels to rescue Kalari prisoners. What his soldiers found there made them furious. The Vorthak had been using captured Kalari as slaves and entertainment. Davis found torture chambers, prison cells filled with starving aliens, and worse things that he would never speak about. His Marines were professionals, but they were also human. They had seen enough. "Sir, we have secured the prisoner sections," reported Sergeant Mike Torres over the radio. "We found 200 Kalari captives. Most are in bad shape, but they will live." "What about Vorthak survivors?" Davis asked. "There are about 50 enemy soldiers who surrendered after we breached their armory. They want to negotiate terms." Davis thought about the tortured Kalari children his medics were treating. He thought about the families that had been torn apart for the entertainment of these monsters. His voice was ice cold when he replied, "Tell them they can surrender unconditionally and face trial for war crimes, or they can resist and be shot. No negotiations." Most of the Vorthak chose to surrender. A few tried to fight and were quickly eliminated by Marines in power armor, carrying weapons designed to stop charging rhinos. The human soldiers showed no mercy to those who had tortured innocent civilians. Back in space, the battle was turning into a complete rout. Half the Vorthak fleet was destroyed and the rest were trying to retreat. But the human ships were faster and their weapons had longer range. There was nowhere to run. Admiral Hayes opened a channel to the surviving Vorthak commanders. "This is Admiral Hayes to all Vorthak vessels. You have one chance to surrender. Drop your shields, power down your weapons, and prepare to be boarded. Anyone who tries to escape will be destroyed." The response came from Vice Admiral Thekmore, who had taken command after Kethvar's death. His voice shook with fear and rage. "You cannot do this to us. We are the Vorthak Empire. We have ruled this galaxy for 3 centuries. "Not anymore," Hayes replied simply. "You have 10 seconds to comply." Thekmore tried to rally his remaining ships for one final attack. "All vessels ramming speed. If we must die, we take these primitives with us." 5 Vorthak ships charged toward the human formation at maximum speed. It was a desperate tactic that sometimes worked against other species who valued their ships more than victory. The humans had a different response. Every ship in the fleet opened fire at once. The space between the two forces filled with kinetic rounds, missiles, and energy beams. The charging Vorthak ships flew directly into a wall of destruction. The last Vorthak vessel exploded just 3 kilometers from the Vengeance. Admiral Hayes watched the debris scatter across space and felt no satisfaction. These aliens had forced this battle through their own cruelty and arrogance. "Signal the planet," she ordered. "Tell Commander Veltash that Thyros is secure. Then, get me a casualty report." "No human casualties, Admiral," came the reply. "Minor damage to 3 ships, but nothing that cannot be repaired. We also rescued 800 Kalari prisoners from enemy vessels." Hayes nodded. The battle was won, but she knew this was just the beginning. Reports were already coming in from across the galaxy. The news of the Vorthak defeat at Thyros was spreading like wildfire. On distant worlds, oppressed species were looking up at the stars with new hope. For the first time in centuries, someone had stood up to the Vorthak Empire and won. The humans had shown that the seemingly invincible aliens could be beaten. But Hayes also knew that the Vorthak would not give up easily. They would send more fleets, bigger ships, and deadlier weapons. The war was far from over. She thought about the tortured Kalari children that her Marines had rescued. She thought about the billions of innocent beings suffering under Vorthak rule across the galaxy. And she thought about the simple human belief that had brought them here. that good people must stand up to bullies, no matter the cost. Set course. For the next system, Hayes ordered. According to our intelligence, there are more Kalari colonies under attack. We have work to do. The human fleet began moving toward their next battle. Behind them, the wreckage of the Third Fleet drifted in space, a warning to anyone who would prey upon the innocent. The galaxy was about to learn that the age of Vorthak terror was ending. The Deathworlders had arrived, and they were just getting started. The news of the Third Fleet's destruction reached the Vorthak homeworld within hours. Emperor Vorthak stood in his throne room, staring at the holographic display that showed nothing but empty space where his most powerful fleet used to be. 30 warships, thousands of soldiers, and his best commander, all gone in a single battle. Explain this to me, the Emperor snarled at his military advisors. How did primitives from a backwater world destroy an entire fleet? Admiral Zekthal, the Emperor's chief military officer, looked terrified. In 300 years of conquest, the Vorthak had never lost a major battle. They had never even been seriously challenged. My lord, the reports are difficult to believe. The humans used kinetic weapons that punched through our shields like they were made of air. Their ships seemed immune to our energy weapons. The Emperor's eyes burned with rage. I do not care what weapons they used. Send the First and Second Fleets immediately. I want these humans crushed and their homeworld burned to ash. But across the galaxy, something else was happening. The story of the human victory was spreading from world to world, carried by traders, diplomats, and refugees. For the first time in centuries, oppressed species were hearing that the Vorthak could be defeated. On the mining world of Kreshtar, enslaved Trixians working in the uranium pits whispered the news to each other. The humans had destroyed an entire Vorthak fleet without losing a single ship. Maybe, just maybe, freedom was possible. On the agricultural world of Vendara, conquered farmers began meeting in secret. If these humans could fight the Vorthak, perhaps they could teach others to do the same. Small groups began planning sabotage missions against their oppressors. In the Great Hall of Zentara Prime, the Galactic Council was in emergency session once again. But this time, the mood was very different. Instead of despair and helplessness, there was excitement and hope. Ambassador Zexhai stood at the podium, but now his blue skin glowed with health and his voice was strong. Honored members, I bring greetings from Commander Veltash of the Thyros Defense Force. Our world is free. The human fleet not only defeated the Vorthak forces but also rescued over 800 of our people who had been taken as slaves. The hall erupted in cheers and applause. For the first time in living memory, good news was coming from a battle against the Vorthak Empire. The Zentaran Prime Minister looked amazed. How many human ships were lost in this battle? None, Zexhai replied simply. The human fleet suffered, no casualties. Their Admiral Hayes reports that Vorthak energy weapons could not penetrate human armor, while human kinetic weapons destroyed enemy ships with single hits. Murmurs of disbelief filled the chamber. It seemed impossible that any species could be so much more advanced in warfare than the mighty Vorthak. But the evidence was undeniable. Dr. Velnash, the old Kalari scientist who had first suggested asking humans for help, stood up slowly. I told you these Deathworlders were different. They do not fight like civilized beings. They fight to win. The Council immediately voted to request a formal alliance with humanity. Within days, similar requests were coming from dozens of other species. Everyone wanted the protection of the humans who had done what no one thought possible. Admiral Hayes received these messages while her fleet was still cleaning up the debris at Thyros. She stood on the bridge of the Vengeance reading formal alliance requests from species she had never heard of. All of them had the same message: please help us fight the Vorthak. Admiral, we are receiving another distress signal, reported her communications officer. This one is from the Zelani system about 6 days away. Vorthak forces are attacking their colonies. Hayes looked at the tactical display. Her fleet was already stretched thin, but these aliens needed help. She thought about the Kalari children that her Marines had rescued, remembering their frightened faces and the injuries inflicted by their captors. Signal the fleet, she ordered. Set course for Zelani space. Maximum speed. Captain Cooper, appeared on the communication screen from the Retribution. "Admiral, should we request reinforcements from Earth? We might be taking on more than we can handle." Hayes considered this. Earth Command had already authorized the construction of 50 new warships based on the success at Thyros, but it would take months to build and crew them. In the meantime, innocent beings were dying every day. "Negative, Captain. We move with what we have. Earth is already building more ships. Until they arrive, we do what we can with what we have." Lieutenant Commander Parker spoke up from the Ghost. "Admiral, I have been monitoring Vorthak communications. They are scared. Really scared. They are pulling forces back from frontier worlds to protect their core systems." This was unexpected good news. For the first time in their history, the Vorthak were acting defensively instead of expanding their empire. The destruction of the Third Fleet had shaken them more than anyone realized. Colonel Davis reported from the Marine quarters. "Ma'am, the rescued Kalari have been asking to help with our next mission. Some of them were soldiers before they were captured. They want to fight alongside us." Hayes thought about this carefully. Human regulations did not allow foreign nationals to serve in combat roles, but these were extraordinary circumstances. Put together a volunteer advisory unit. They can help with intelligence and translation. No direct combat roles until we clear it with Earth Command. The human fleet jumped to hyperspace, heading for their next battle. But behind them, they left something more valuable than military victory. They left hope. On Kalari Prime, the homeworld that had been preparing for inevitable conquest, people emerged from hiding places and bomb shelters. Children played in the streets again. Families began planning for a future they thought they would never see. Captain Ben Taylor, a human merchant who had volunteered his cargo ship for the relief mission, was organizing food and medical supplies for the liberated Kalari colonies. His converted freighter Defiance was not much to look at, but it could carry enough supplies to feed thousands of refugees. "Doctor, we have medical equipment coming in from 6 different human worlds," Taylor reported to Dr. Kate Miller aboard the hospital ship Mercy. "Plasma generators, surgical robots, and enough antibiotics to treat an entire planet." Dr. Miller smiled as she watched Kalari children playing with human medical robots. The machines had been programmed to entertain patients while providing treatment. It was amazing how quickly the two species were learning to work together. Real shock came when the human fleet reached Zalani space. They expected to find another Vorthak occupation force like the one at Thyros. Instead, they found the enemy fleet retreating as fast as their ships could travel. "Admiral, the Vorthak are running away," reported the tactical officer with amazement. "They are not even trying to fight." Hayes studied the retreating ships on her screen. These aliens had ruled the galaxy through fear and intimidation for 3 centuries. Now that someone had proven they could be beaten, their psychological advantage was gone. She opened a communication channel to the Zalani defenders on the planet below. "This is Admiral Hayes of the Human Defense Force. Are you in need of assistance?" The reply came from Governor Melvani, the elected leader of the Zalani colonies. His voice was filled with gratitude and disbelief. "Admiral Hayes, the Vorthak fleet withdrew as soon as your ships appeared on our sensors. We are free." Just like that. Word of the Vorthak retreat spread even faster than news of their defeat. Across the galaxy, oppressed worlds began to realize that their oppressors were not invincible. The empire that had seemed eternal was starting to crack. Emperor Vorthak received reports of retreating fleets and rebellions on conquered worlds. His advisors brought news of humans appearing in system after system, driving away Vorthak forces without even firing a shot. "My lord," Admiral Zekthul reported nervously, "the First and Second Fleets are requesting permission to avoid human ships entirely. They say fighting these Deathworlders is suicide." The Emperor's rage was so great that his roar could be heard throughout the palace. "Cowards! I will execute every captain who runs from these primitives." But his threats fell on deaf ears. The Vorthak military had built their reputation on easy victories against peaceful species. They had no idea how to fight an enemy that was not afraid of them. Admiral Hayes stood on the observation deck of the Vengeance, looking out at the stars. Her fleet had grown to 30 ships as more human vessels arrived from Earth. Each day brought new requests for help from species across the galaxy. "Admiral," her aide reported, "Earth Command is asking for your recommendation on fleet expansion. How many ships do we need to keep the peace out here?" Hayes thought about the size of the galaxy and the millions of worlds that needed protection from bullies like the Vorthak. It would take years to build enough ships to patrol everything properly. "Tell Earth Command we need at least 200 ships," she replied, "and tell them to start training Kalari and other allied species as crews. This is too big a job for humans alone." 6 months later, the Galactic Council met again in the Great Hall of Zentara Prime. But this time, they had a new member. Admiral Hayes sat at the council table wearing the simple blue uniform of the Human Defense Force, representing Earth and galactic affairs for the first time. The reports were remarkable. Vorthak forces had withdrawn from over 50 worlds. Their empire was collapsing as conquered species rose up in rebellion. The reign of terror that had lasted 3 centuries was finally ending. Ambassador Zexhai stood to address the council one final time as the representative of a free Kalari nation. "6 months ago, my people faced extinction. Today, we are free, and our alliance with humanity grows stronger every day. The humans have shown us that evil triumphs only when good beings choose to do nothing." Admiral Hayes rose to respond. Her words were simple, but they echoed across the galaxy. "Humanity did not come here to conquer or rule. We came because someone asked for help against monsters. As long as there are bullies in this galaxy, there will be humans willing to stand up to them." The age of Vorthak terror was over. The age of galactic justice had begun, and at the center of it all stood the species from the death world called Earth, proving that sometimes the best way to keep peace was to be very, very good at war.